My name is Cam Tai, and this is my Superlite Coupe. The Superlite Coupe is a component car that you build yourself. It's manufactured by a company called Superlite, also known as Race Car Replicas, and they're based in Michigan. Yeah, so I selected the Superlite because in my normal day-to-day job, I get to work with a bunch of really smart, talented people, and we make some of the most complex machines that you can imagine. And while I enjoy doing this, I don't actually get to build our devices or our machines myself. And so I'd really been wanting to have a project that I could work on that where I could actually build something with my own hands. And so I started looking at cars. I first started looking at the Shelbys, the Factory 5 Cobra replicas. And those are really interesting, but the open top just didn't do it for me. And so I started looking into cars that were closed canopied, and that brought me to the Ultima GTR, the Superlite, and the Factory 5 GTM. So I've been thinking about those cars for a while, and between those cars, when I look at the Superlite, it evokes an emotional response in me. And you do these types of projects because it's a passion project. It's something that you have to be driven by to complete, otherwise you never complete it. And so when I saw the Superlite, I knew it was going to be the Superlite. It spoke to me on a very, I'll say, emotional level. Yeah, so it was quite an adventure, actually. So as the car was coming to us, it came on a very large car carrier, multi-level car carrier, and it was being delivered to my father-in-law's house, Bob. And he lives in a neighborhood that's got really tight, winding roads to get up into his property. And so getting the truck up to close enough to his house where we could drop the Superlite off was a bit of a challenge in and of itself. And then once we were able to get the Superlite off the car carrier and get it actually onto his driveway, the next challenge was that I was going to be building this project in his lower garage, and the decline to get down to his lower garage is pretty extreme. And so we ended up strapping the Superlite to my father-in-law's, let's say, I guess, rebuilt Studebaker, and we were able to back the Superlite slowly down the drive using a tow rope. And it was an exceptionally steep decline. I was afraid that we were going to lose the car going down to the garage, but we were able to get it down into the garage. And once we got it down there, the Superlite lived in Bob's lower garage for about, almost 2 years, while I was working on a couple of other projects before I could devote my time to working on the Superlite. Yeah, so Superlite's got a really incredible website. When you go to their website, they have this fantastic configurator. You can look at all the options that they offer, and as you're selecting and making your options, the configurator updates the car that you'll be receiving, essentially. So you can kind of see what your car is going to look like before you click purchase. And once you click purchase, the next step is you wire them a whole bunch of money to get started, and then the next part is the hardest part. It's the wait. Generally speaking, it takes about 16 weeks, and more recently it's taken longer for you to get your car. But in that time, it's basically lights out. You really don't get too much in terms of updates when it comes to getting status progress on your car. So you're just waiting, and then one day you get a call from the car carrier saying, "Hey, I'm going to be there on Tuesday. Drop your car off," and then they show up. Funny story. So I had been obsessing about this car for many months, and I'd gone through the websites, the GT40's website, which is the forum that most SLC car builders frequent, and I think I read just about every single post made on that site for the last 10 years, and I had been obsessing about this car for many months. Anyway, I was at work and had a particularly good day at work, and I just decided that I was going to buy the car. And so on the way home, before even telling my wife that I was going to do it, I stopped off at the bank, did a wire transfer, and came home, and I said, "Babe, I pulled the trigger on the Superlite." She wasn't surprised. So once you receive the car and you get it down to wherever it is you're going to work on the car, it basically comes as a rolling chassis. So the factory assembles the car well enough so that it can be rolled on and off the car carrier, but really that's about it. You get the chassis, the wheels are hung on the car, and the suspension's bolted together. And then when you open the car up, it's just packed full of boxes, just packed full of boxes. And you almost need 3 car spaces or 3 garage spaces, parking spaces, in order to work on the car, because the first thing you do is you take the body off the car, and then you got to store that someplace, and then you take all the boxes out of the car, and then you got to store that someplace, and then you got the chassis and the frame that you've got to work with, that you have to slowly rebuild the car with upon, basically. And so you basically strip the entire thing down to the bare chassis, take everything off, because you have to double check any of the work that you've gotten. You can't assume that as they put the thing together, that it's done to the correct torque specs and all that kind of stuff, because they've just basically assembled it well enough that it can be transported to your location. And so yeah, you basically start with a bare chassis with nothing other than a bunch of welded aluminum, and then you know, the toughest part for the project, I think, for me, was just the very first hole that I drilled in the chassis. You go through this sort of analysis paralysis, like, oh, if I put this here, what if like 3 weeks from now or a month from now I figure out that I want to move it here or do something else? And so you just go through this whole process of hemming and hawing, and oh, am I going to screw this up? And so actually drilling the first hole was the toughest part. And once you get past that first part of you know, drilling and tapping your first hole, then it gets easier, and you start to get braver, and you start going through and actually putting stuff in the car, and then you can actually see progress when it comes to the car. But getting to that point takes a little bit of a push. Yeah, so this car is exceptionally low. When I first got the car and I wanted to start taking the car apart, I tried to use one of those low-profile standard hydraulic jacks. And the thing with this car is that the frame is so stiff that if you try to jack it up at one corner and get any kind of height out of it, basically 3 corners will come off the ground and the car becomes very unsteady. And so I needed a different solution to get this car up into the air, and that solution was the Quickjack. The Quickjack is an amazing lifesaver when it comes to a project like this. It's very low profile, you slide it underneath, and the beautiful thing is once you hit the button and it starts to raise the car, all 4 corners of the car go up at the same time, and so it keeps the car level. And once you get it back down and it's on the lockouts, you can keep it at 2 different levels of working height, and you can leave it there for, you know, months on end, basically. And so when I was working on this car, and once it went up on the Quickjacks, it probably didn't come back down for another 7 months, 8 months, and the entire time the car is very stable. You can jump on top of the car, you can work underneath the car, move all around it. So the Quickjack for me was an indispensable tool while I was working on this project. Let's see, I received the car in October of 2015, and I was working full-time at the time, and I couldn't get to the car for, about a year. So the car kind of sat there for about a year before I could actually start working on it in earnest. And then once I started working on the car, it took me about a year, basically working full-time job, to finish the car. So about 2,500 hours. I would wake up in the mornings, go down to the garage, take a break at lunch, 5 o'clock rolls around. I would stop, go and pick my daughter up from preschool, and then come home. And kind of the rule that my wife and I had kind of set up was no working in the car on the evenings and the weekends. Those were family time. So I kind of treated it like a job for basically a year. So my wife is an incredible woman. She has been incredibly supportive throughout the entire process. I think that her having grown up in a household where her father is very much a car guy was very helpful to me. I think that kind of shaped in her mind that, you know, guys have a certain need, and one of those needs could be cars, and so when they get involved with cars, they just kind of get a little crazy, and you just kind of have to let them do their thing. And so having grown up in a household where her father was restoring cars all the time, car projects weren't a new thing for her. And so when I started talking about doing a project like this, it really didn't surprise her all that much. And I think coming home and telling her that I just spent a whole lot of money without consulting her was a bit of a surprise, but she got over that relatively quickly, and throughout she has been very encouraging. I will say that when I got the car to a point where it was drivable and I said, babe, I think it's time, I can kind of call this done, she was very relieved and very happy to see the car get to that point. And I took her around the block for one short drive, and that was enough for her. So she's very happy that I'm done, and she's very supportive, in terms of whatever modifications or upgrades that I need to do to kind of keep the car going. She's been very supportive of and been very understanding of. I'm exceptionally lucky. Yeah, so when it came to the options, I would say anything that had the word carbon on it, I went ahead and selected. I'm a bit obsessive when it comes to the carbon fiber stuff, so I kind of selected everything when it came to the carbon options. When it came to the wheels, I would actually the wheels were a very easy choice for me because I can't remember. I think Superlite offers 6 or 7 different wheel options. And I remember in my searching of the car, there was a photo of the car, and it was the chassis. There was an engine in it, some plumbing, some wiring, and it was getting ready to be dyno tuned, basically. So it was in what we call the go-kart stage. Basically, it's wired and it's completed just enough to get driving, but it's really not a complete car at that point. Anyway, that particular car, I think that particular builder was building a 1,000 horsepower powertrain. And seeing a photo of that car with the engine, bare chassis exposed and everything, and seeing just all the guts of the car exposed was, for me, just an eye-opening kind of thing for me. And I immediately gravitated towards the wheel that builder had selected, and that was the wheel set that I ended up going with. I think that in terms of the shape, the design, the aggressiveness, it fit best for this car. And so for me, the wheel option was pretty obvious. When it comes to other options that you can get from Superlite, however, they offer from mild to wild. So this would be considered a street car, kind of a crazy street car, but this is considered their street car trim. They also offer additional upgrades that you can choose from, which kick the car up in terms of capability and performance. You can do ceramic brakes, and you can do other, I'll say, very, very much race-oriented upgrades. Those are much costlier, and quite frankly, for the type of driving that I was expecting to do, I didn't think that was something that I would choose for myself. And as it is, the quote-unquote street trim for the car is a pretty extreme machine as it is. Let's see other options. This car comes in the race tail configuration. So the race tail configuration, the rear has an aluminum diffuser, and the whole back end is exposed. You can basically see the engine, you can see the transaxle, you see the big fat rear tires poking out. And when I saw that as the option, as opposed to the street tail option, which has a closed back, basically a little more traditional styling, I knew I had to go with the race tail. It was just an incredible thing to be able to see all that machinery exposed. And then, of course, the big obnoxious wing hanging out the back. The wing is, for me, I enjoy it. I like the look. I think it fits well with the styling of the car. And so I decided I had to have of course, the carbon optioned wing as well. Otherwise, I went with relatively traditional options in terms of the rest of the trim with the car. So this car, I decided to build this car with an LS3. The LS3 motor is a well-known motor. It's very well sorted, and it's basically bulletproof when it comes to bang for the buck. It's a really tough thing to find another option that is as competitive or compelling as the LS3 motor is. You can get a crate motor from GM, and they do such a wonderful job to make it essentially plug and play. You get the motor, you get the wiring harness, and it's everything that you need to get the car running. It's really an incredible package that GM offers. So this car has the LS376 525, which is their 525 horsepower variant. With a little bit of tuning, this car currently makes about 550 horsepower and about 500 foot-pounds of torque. It is mated to a Graziano 6-speed transaxle, and that transaxle is a 4-wheel drive transaxle that's also used in the Audi R8s and the Lamborghini Gallardos. I sourced the transaxle through RCR. I didn't go through them for the engine. However, RCR, Superlite, they will work with you. Whatever engine you want, whatever powertrain you want to use, they will work with you to figure out how to get it in the car. The chassis is kind of designed and well suited to the LS motors, but there are other combinations that other builders have gone. I've heard of Maserati engines, Ferrari engines, Coyotes, the Hemis. You can basically put whatever motor you want in here, and if it doesn't fit, then the factory will work with you to come up with whatever modifications are needed to the chassis to make it fit. And so they are an exceptionally awesome partner when it comes to collaborating to come up with a build. So the transaxle comes out of the Audi R, or is also used in the Audi R8 or the Lamborghini Gallardo. And for the shifter, I have the gated shift mechanism pulled straight out of the Audi R8. I think that half the driving experience is the shifting itself, and the shifter mechanism that Audi has designed for the R8 is just an incredible driving experience, and really half the fun in driving this car is just throwing through the gears. Yeah, so as I was going through and doing all the reading prior to moving forward with the Superlite, I'd done a tremendous amount of research on other component cars out there, and one of the things that really appealed to me about the Superlite, and I'm a mechanical engineer by training, is I felt that the engineering behind the Superlite was really advanced and quite superior relative to some of the other offerings out there. And one of the things that really spoke to me was that everything was designed from the ground up, so no compromises. In some cars, some component cars that you can build, there are a lot of takeoffs that you use. Basically, you can get a donor car and strip the car down and pull the suspension off that car and plug it into the car that you're building. Those components are designed by teams and teams of engineers, and they are optimized to the nth degree for the car that they were designed for. And when you take a component like that and you put it into another thing that you've designed, I'll say that the chances that you are arriving at an optimized design for that suspension, for that chassis, is pretty unlikely. There are compromises somewhere. And so I didn't really want to pursue a build that would be so heavily based upon takeoff parts and adapting pre-existing components, basically. And one other aspect of this car that I like, and so having said that, this car has no compromises. The suspension was designed from the ground up, clean sheet, and so it has been fully optimized for performance. The other aspect of other options out there are that many other component cars use tubular steel construction. So that's chromoly steel tubes, and you have Heim joints screwed into the ends, and that's the bulk of your design, and you weld the tubes together, and then that's how you create an A-arm, essentially. I'm just not a big fan of tubular steel construction. When it comes to the Superlite, everything on the car is billet aluminum, and besides looking really beautiful, again, I think that the construction, the accuracy, the robustness of the design is superior relative to some of the other offerings out there. So I really felt that the Superlite package, as far as other component cars available out there today, it's the most engineered and it's the most optimized for performance, and that really spoke to the engineering side of my brain, and that was also one of the reasons that pushed me towards the Superlite as a project. Yeah, so I have a bit of OCD when it comes to a lot of things, and one of the things that I learned very quickly when it came to this project is that I had to put my OCD to bed, because if I had allowed it to control me throughout this project never would have been completed. An example of that is, I polished the suspension. You know, when you get the car and you take it apart and you're looking at the suspension, it's like jewelry. I mean, it's just automotive jewelry that you're holding in your hands. Everything is just CNC machined. It's beautiful. You see all the machining marks and everything. It's wonderful. Anyway, I wanted to preserve that look as best as I could. And so, you know, I didn't want all those little machining marks. I wanted to get rid of those. So I polished everything out. You know, you first use sandpaper, use polish and compound. Got it basically so that I could see my reflection perfectly in the surface of the A-arms. And I had been advised that aluminum oxidizes pretty badly, and it doesn't look good when it gets oxidized. And so I had to protect the raw aluminum from oxidation, being exposed to the elements, getting exposed to water, that type of stuff. It wasn't going to look very good for very long. And I had been advised to use this compound. It's a liquid film that you apply to the aluminum, and that would protect the aluminum from oxidation. So I did that. The issue is that any time that I touched the suspension parts, after polishing, after cleaning, after protecting, the protective layer, basically it was an oil, it would leave fingerprints, and the fingerprints were driving me absolutely bananas. I would touch something, and then I'd have to go rub it off, and then I would touch something else, and then I'd have to rub it off, and I knew that was going to drive me absolutely bananas. And so I had to have another solution that I could live with, where the parts would be protected, but they would still be aesthetically pleasing, and that's what brought me down the path of hard anodizing. So all the suspension components on this car are hard anodized. Makes the part a little bit stronger in terms of surface toughness, protects it from oxidation, and it looks good to boot. Yeah, so again, I use this project as an excuse for me to pick up and learn skills that I had always wanted to learn, but just never really had the opportunity to pursue it. I felt that this project would really push me towards doing things that I hadn't done before. And so one of those things that I had really wanted to learn for a very long time was powder coating. And of course, the idiot that I am, I decided to go with one of the most complex combinations that you go with for my first project, my first powder coating project. It's a candy-colored orange, and the difficulty with this is that you have to apply the powder coat in multiple layers and build it up in order to get the effect that you're trying to achieve. And each subsequent layer of powder coat that you are applying gets harder and harder and harder to get consistent and looking nice. And so the smarter thing would have been just to pick a color and go with the single color and be done with it, just a single coat. But no, idiot that I am, I had to go with the multi-coat, multi-layer finish, and it ended up turning out pretty decently well. The brakes are far enough that you can't tell them, that there's slight shades of differences between them. But when you have them side by side, then you can see slight shades of differences between the various colors. And again, the OCD in me was screaming, but I had to put that down. Otherwise, again, I would not have been able to complete this project. Yeah, so early on in my engineering career, I worked at a assembly plant where we assembled cars, and I was a BSR, a Buzz, Squeak, Rattle engineer. And one of my jobs was to drive cars around on a test drive and try to find these noises in the cars. And if I found a noise, I would put it on a shaker and I would shake the car so that I could isolate and find the noise and figure out what was going on with the car, with the idea that if one car off the line was making this noise, there were probably other cars on the line making this noise as well. And so we wanted to make sure that all the cars that we were sending out were high quality and it didn't have these issues. It's these little noises, these little rattles that really bother you as a consumer. You could drive around and the car could understeer, or it could, wander. Those are things that you just deal with because that's normal, right? Cars do that. But when you hear a car squeak as you're going over bumps, that's something that drives you absolutely bananas. And so the BSR was very important to make sure that those very, very annoying things didn't make it out of the factory floor. Anyway, this car has, it's not an OEM engineered car. It does not have BSR engineering. It does not have NVH engineering built into it. Whatever I did to mitigate against those issues, it was all on me. And so I have trained my ear as a BSR engineer to pick up on all these noises. And I knew that this car was going to be an absolute basket case when it came to noises, rattling. The car has 0 rubber bushings anywhere in the car. Every single joint in the car is a hard metal-to-metal joint. And so I knew that it was going to make a lot of noise driving. And so, again, my OCD, the BSR, all that stuff, I had to, you know, bring that down a notch. But also, I invested a tremendous amount of time installing about 400 pounds of noise and heat isolation material in the car to try to create as much of a barrier between those various noise inputs and the cabin of the car. And even with 400 pounds of material in the car, it still is a noisy ride. But once you get going and you start driving and rolling through the gears, the noise doesn't bother you at all. The instructions that RCR offers along with the car are actually quite basic. There's a lot of, you know, words of advice. Don't use counterfeit bolts. This is how you torque a bolt, that kind of thing. Apply torque stripe to make sure that you know when bolts lose preload, that kind of stuff. Here's generally how you want to install the engine. Here's generally how you want to install the throttle pedal and the air conditioning and that kind of stuff. So they give you very basic and generic instructions. The thing is with a project like this and with you know many component cars is that really it's a starting point. And you know I've heard one builder say that their car was a one of one, and it's true. Every single car is a one of one. It's, you know, every build is unique. And so as far as instructions, you don't get instructions that say take tab A, put it into slot B, here's how you build the car A through Z. You don't get that. You just get some helpful suggestions on, you know, various aspects of the build and of the car, but otherwise it's on you to figure things out. And so, as I said before, I spent a tremendous amount of time on the GT40's website, just reviewing other people's build threads, getting ideas from them, but also learning from the things that they had done, the mistakes they had made, and trying to just learn from their mistakes and incorporate some of the things that they had done into my own car. And so it was just, you know, learn as you go. Lots of reading, lots of figuring out. But otherwise, yeah, the instructions are relatively basic. Yeah, so I decided to document my build in as much detail as I did for a couple of reasons. One of which is I wanted to contribute back to the community. There were a lot of, there were several really great build threads that I had followed, and I felt that the forum format was not as conducive for really getting a whole lot of detail about the build out to a wide audience. And so I decided to blog, basically create a blog for my car as I was going. And so as I did that, you know, as I did the build, I took tons of photos, and, you know, I would come home at night and I'd do a couple of paragraphs of typing. And at the end of it, I think when I finished the car to a point where it was drivable, I decided to print my blog out, and I think I printed out almost 600 pages of text and photos for the build. But yeah, so I think that having that book at the end of this project was also one of those things that I kind of wanted to have, so that I could go back and review the build as it was going, and kind of remember the process for myself. So that was another reason for why I decided to document the build in as much detail as I did. Yeah, what do I like best about the car? Maybe I should answer this in two ways. What do I like best about the experience in the project, and then what do I like best about the car itself? I'd say one of the things that I love most about the car is that I finished the car and that I get to drive the car. You know, so often these projects just end up as being very expensive garage ornaments, or, you know, people get to the point where they are trying to just build the absolute perfect car, and, you know, my hat's off to them. At the end of the day, I wanted a car that I would enjoy driving, and that's what I achieved. And so with respect to the project side of things, I'm just happy that I was able to push through. There were some dark, tough days during the project, and fortunately I was able to push through them and actually complete the project. Which brings me to the second point, driving the car. There is nothing like this car that I have ever experienced. I've driven some exotic cars, I've driven Vipers, I've driven high horsepower cars, some of the best handling cars, but this car is just on another level. If I could describe it as being very raw, it's exceptionally raw. This particular build, it's just you and the car. There's no traction control, there's no ABS, there's no power steering, there's no power brakes. It is literally you and the machine. And it's such a raw driving experience. The suspension is so tight, you are so connected, you feel everything through the steering wheel, through the seats, and you're so low. I mean, you really do feel, and it sounds cheesy, I know, but you feel like you're part of the machine, and I love that aspect of this car. I'll say it's been about 3 years now since I finished this project and started driving it, and every single time I get into this car, I strap in, put the 6-point harness on, my heart rate starts to go up, the adrenaline starts to pump, and then I take off in the car, and every time it takes me a few minutes, it takes me a couple miles to kind of get the heart rate back down and get the adrenaline kind of bled off a little so that I can kind of get back into a normal state. But yeah, every single time I get into this car, I still get that feeling that like, oh man, I can't believe I'm about to do this kind of feeling. And so I love that aspect of the car, and I love the driving experience that it allows me to have, being so connected and just really being able to feel everything through every part of the car and feeling like I'm part of the machine. Yeah, what part of this build am I most proud of? I think, again, kind of as I said before, just having completed it. I had never taken on a project of this scope before. I'm a car enthusiast. I love tinkering with cars. In college, I was part of the Formula SAE team there, where we design and we build a Formula style car, and we competed with other schools. So I wasn't exactly new to the world of fabrication in my job. Every day, we design things, we get things made. So I'm not new to the world of fabrication and assembly and that kind of stuff. But I had never actually tried to take on a project of this scope myself. I've rebuilt engines, I've done basic bolt-ons, superchargers, that kind of stuff, but not to this scale. And there was a lot of learning. I had never worked with fiberglass before. I had never worked with carbon fiber before. And so this project really forced me to push and learn and just overcome. And so that whole experience, that's part of why you do a project like this. You don't do it because it's easy. You do it because it's hard, and you do it because you want to learn. You want to go through that experience. If you do the trade between taking a year off of work to work on this project and the salary that I lost to do that, in addition to the amount of money that it cost to purchase all the parts, the kit itself, and all that, I would be crazy. I could have gone out and bought a really nice exotic car. But instead, here's what I ended up with, and I love it. And part of that is because I got to have that journey, that experience of starting with, this thing that is basically not quite a machine, but it's an assemblage of parts that don't quite work together just yet. And then I got to transform it into this machine here. So yeah, I'm very proud of having been able to go through that journey, complete that journey, and be very happy with the project at the end of it. The most fun part of this project, let's see. I would say that one of the most exciting memories that I have of the car was the first time I drove the car, and this is what we call the go-kart stage. So it's basically bare chassis, the suspension's been hung, things are sort of aligned, you have the engine in there, you maybe have an air filter in there, you have your electrical system sort of hooked up, the radiator's all hooked up, and you have a throttle pedal. I don't even think that I had fully secured my seat to the chassis yet at that point. So it's literally a steering wheel, throttle pedal. The brakes are maybe they're bled in, maybe they're not, but they work well enough. and that's the go-kart stage. And when I first got the car to the go-kart stage and I drove the car around the block for the first time, my heart was just racing. One of the things going through my head at the time was, don't wreck, don't wreck, don't wreck. But just the experience also, being so low to the ground was completely new to me. And, you know, being able to just put your hand out and touch the ground as you're sitting in your car is a pretty incredible experience. And, you know, the raw nature of the car, the engine is, you know, inches behind your head, that whole experience, oh gosh, yeah, that was an incredible experience for me, getting to the go-kart stage and taking it around the block for the first time. That was incredibly fun. Any future plans to build upon the car or to track the car? You know, there are certain upgrades that I have planned and that I'm slowly chipping away at. Now that I'm back to having a full-time job, I have a young child and a family, and so and I have other hobbies which take up a fair amount of time as well. And so the time that I have to devote to modifying and upgrading the car is precious little these days. But I have a couple of projects that I've been working on that I've just been chipping away at over time, but nothing really serious. The car is at a point now where it's driving. I love driving it. It's, you know, knock on wood, relatively reliable right now, and so it's in a great state. So no real major plans to upgrade the car, but a couple of small projects here and there. Future plans, other cars. As of now, no real plans to work on another major project like this. As I said, I have other hobbies, and I've kind of shifted recently into some other hobbies. But otherwise, it's drive the car and enjoy it when I can. If I could go back and talk to my former past self, would I advise myself to do this project, knowing what I know now? Gosh, I'd say knowing that I was able to finish the project, yes. I would encourage my past self to totally jump in, do it. It's going to be this wonderful experience. It's going to be tough. You're going to hate it at times. You're going to love it. It's a great experience. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is, oh my God, I spent a year working on this project, and it was tough. Would I do it again? Gosh, I would say if I wrecked the car and I had to fix the car, I probably wouldn't fix it. I don't think I have the energy in me to do another project like this or to fix the car if I got into a really serious wreck with it. So that said, yeah, I think I would go back and talk to myself, and I'd say, you're going to have a wonderful time. It's going to be tough, but you're going to get through to the end of it. And when you get through to the end of it, you're going to have this incredible experience. You're going to have incredible memories, and you're going to have this incredible machine that you get to drive whenever you want. So I would advise myself, yes, absolutely jump in and do it. Let's see, would I change anything? Yeah, probably. As I said, when I started this project, one of the reasons why I did this project was because it would force me to learn, which means that there's a lot of stuff on this car that I learned doing for the first time. And so if I had an opportunity to practice on something else before actually working on this project, then I think as a whole, the entire project would be better. Would be finished a little bit more polished and look a little bit nicer. So having said that, if I had the luxury of learning outside of the project and then bringing that learning and that experience to the project, that would have been awesome. But I think that using the project as a forcing function and as a means to learn was a great tool and a great experience in and of itself. And so, yeah, I think that's part of the experience, and I've enjoyed, or I had enjoyed that aspect of it. So, yeah, it's all part of the experience. Yeah. So, what car events to enjoy? Obviously, cars and coffees are really fun events. I go to those on occasion. This car tends to attract crowds, and it can be a bit overwhelming at times, having so many people come up to you and ask questions, and you get a lot of the same questions as well. I know some SLC owners, they'll bring out like a sign with them that has all the specs of the car, so they don't have to keep repeating themselves. So I haven't done that myself, but I do enjoy going out. I enjoy seeing other people's projects, and Cars and Coffees events are great for doing that. We have a wonderful one here locally, the Lafayette Cars and Coffee. It's bananas. It is by far the biggest cars and coffee event I have ever seen in my life. And you get the full spectrum of cars there. You get crazy exotics, you get awesome, BMWs, Audis, and you also get these crazy personal car projects similar to the SLC, other hand-built cars. You just get the full spectrum at this event, and I really enjoyed the couple of times that I've been. I really enjoyed that experience. I also really love just talking to people and showing them the car, particularly kids. Kids go to these cars and coffee events, and where else can a kid stand next to a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a car like the SLC and be able to talk to the owner? And I particularly like to have kids sit in the car and poke around and ask questions about the car. And I enjoy telling them, this is a car that you can build in your garage. And if I can maybe help inspire some kid to say, hey, this guy did it, maybe I can do it one day. And maybe they can pursue projects of their own, of similar scope and magnitude. I would love to be able to get the younger folks interested in projects such as these. So I enjoy the cars and coffee events. I enjoy those types of events. I really enjoy driving the car. These days, I don't have a lot of time, so what I tend to do these days on the weekends is before my wife and my daughter are awake, I'll go out, I'll drive in the canyons, and I'll be in and out before the rest of the public kind of shows up. And so I get to have my own quiet time with the car, and really it's point of the project is to have that experience of building it, but also to drive the car, and I just love driving the car. And so really that's these days what I do. Just get out, find a quiet road somewhere, and just drive the car. Thank you so much for coming out and talking to me and videoing the car and having this conversation. It's been a great experience. I'll say that I've enjoyed watching your videos, and your videos are getting better and better each time. I had a ton of fun shooting with you guys, and I'm looking forward to seeing the video on this car and the future cars that you've got. I know you had another car lined up after this one, which was pretty incredible as well. And so I'm looking forward to the additional content that you guys come out with.